Okay. Hello, everybody. This is day 3 of me talking about my trauma bonding experience. The last place I left off was college, and I talked about, some of the family issues that happened, and I also talked about community issues that happened that were trying to stop me from going to college. And today, I am going to get into what made the college experience overall, the entire like from my freshman year to my senior year of undergraduate school, what made it a traumatic experience. So if you're looking at the screen, it's undeniable that I'm black. And one thing that I had to learn about being black in this world is that the world suffers, right? But as black people, we have a different type of suffering. So I never refer to myself as a person of color. I always refer to myself as black. And that is why there had to be special places fought for and carved out for black people to sit in, right? Because we were not allowed into the mainstream. And that's just not an American dynamic. I do come from a part of my family that is Afro Portuguese. So even in Brazil, not being in America, but in the Americas, black people, even in Brazil, were not treated with respect. And if you look at any culture, whether that be even in Africa, where under the guise of imperialism and colonialism, black people were locked out of their own places in their own continent, in their own countries. You look at Europe, and the same thing was happening, where black people, especially after the Moors were there, and there was an expurgation of the Moors, they were treated with impunity. You look at certain Asian countries, in fact, the majority of Asian countries, where there is a black population that exists there, like i.e. India, i.e. China, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, places like that, where they have populations of black people who are treated horribly based on an anti-black sentiment. So when we talk about anti-blackness, it's a global phenomenon. But when it comes down to the college environment, what has to be understood is that even at a historically black college, where most of us chose to go to a school that would be a safe space, it's not really a safe space if you think about it, because all of these people are traumatized. And I'll break it down in this way right here. So, already in the black community, where we have been denied education for centuries, we have been denied personhood for centuries, we have been denied capital to increase said personhood for centuries. There's always a couple of people within that race, that community, within being black, that have been able to defy the odds of what it is to be black, quote unquote, which is, I don't have to speak a certain way to be considered black. I don't have to wear my clothes in a particular way. I don't have to take on certain societal debts, in order to be that person that's black, that is stereotypically black. So for a lot of people, the graduation from high school, what we don't understand is that's not just a diploma for an educated black person. For an educated black person, that is, I didn't get pregnant, or I didn't get anybody pregnant. I didn't get hooked on drugs. I didn't sell drugs, or I don't have a police record on my name. Because to us, we've normalized it through this looking glass self. If you want to get into sociologically about it, talking about Cooley, we have a looking glass self perception that because society sees me one way, I must see myself that way too. And that's not everybody, because it definitely wasn't me. I knew that, I grew up, like if you listen to some of my stories before, I have a father who was on drugs, right? He was in the system. He did not have to go in that direction, but he did anyway. I feel that because I didn't go in that direction, I felt that I was going to be free in college to be around more like minded people, when in reality, I was not around like minded people. I was around traumatized academics. And I have no problem saying that about Morehouse College or Spelman College. I would say the same thing about any university system, because I believe that anytime the nerds, and that's typically the kind of environment that we grew up in. We grew up in an environment where if you were smart, you were treated like shit. And I think that's why, if you look at a lot of social things that are happening now, Donald Trump's presidency, for one, that's a whole other story, but it speaks to a reality of people not using their brain. and being influenced by some other shit, but I digress. You're in an environment in college where we were all some sort of outcast before we got to college. A lot of people don't want to acknowledge that, but usually when people go to college, it's not the ones who were the most popular. They were the ones who were the most smart. They had the most cunning. They were able to understand life in a different direction. And if you're black, you understood that going to college was an escape from the reality in which you would have had to live had you not gone to college. But that does not go without saying that you didn't get to college and you didn't bring trauma with you. As I stated in a previous post, I was saying that, I wish that in college, mental health services were more readily available for the student body, that we didn't have a student body of 3,000 students. You only had 2 or 3 counselors. You needed more. The experience, in my opinion, should have focused on this is who you were instead of symbolic ritual, because Morehouse did a lot of symbolic ritual, just as Spelman did a lot of symbolic ritual. But there has to be a fortifying of, okay, this is what your trauma was growing up. Okay, rather you had been raped, rather you had gone through evictions and economic things, rather you had gone through severe bullying. The mental health services should have been readily available for people to do that so that they could, have that ability to turn into, fully functioning adults. And that just wasn't readily available. I know I was with a Spelman sister about a week ago, and we were talking about the fact that, she had to go through deep therapy to get herself on track. Because what she had not realized was that in her life, there was a lot of deep-seated trauma that led into deep-seated relationship issues that had to force her into focusing on her mental health. Now, if our colleges were about that life of making sure that you were already mentally acute, we would not have had to do this after we left the institution. And, I think even for me, having a dark night of the soul recently, my dark night of the soul ended in 2019 around the month of April, and then I had the remnants of it until like July of 2019 as well. And I had to realize why I had to go through a dark night of the soul. And it was because there was so much within college. Like, I find myself now disconnecting from people I went to college with. And this is like, I love Morehouse. Trust me, I love Morehouse. I think that it was a very beautiful experience for me. But I think that what happened with it was I didn't go to Morehouse like typical students. And this is what I was talking to my Spelman sisters about this past week. We were poor, if we're going to be very honest about that. If I'm being very honest about it, poor. And when I say poor, it was poor not by choice, but because, I didn't have that kind of support going through college. I was a work study student. I worked and I went to school at the exact same time. I did not understand the gravity of that until later. There were students I went to school with who were on scholarship, and they did not have the same struggle. I did not look at that at that time. So I was not understanding of the fact that, Gabe, it is hard. This is harsh. And even though it's hard and it's harsh, some of them scholarship students, in fact, the majority of those scholarship students either lost scholarships and did not finish Morehouse, whereas you had to go work and do you, and you ended up finishing on time with your degree in hand. You walked away from Morehouse with a degree. You left Morehouse, you went to the military, you were honorably discharged, then you went off to graduate school, and you got dual degrees from the University of Southern California. That's almost unheard of a person in my position. So I had to realize that the trauma that I was going through and the adrenaline I was running off of, this was something that made other people see me as a joke in the beginning, but then understand the power I had afterwards, and then they began to show their true colors. And because I wasn't cognizant of that at the time, because I don't think you become cognizant of it at the time, what you do is you're surviving. And you understand that I don't have time for the games that other people have to play because I have to go do something with my life. It's either I get this degree or I come back to Houston you know, and I do shit that everybody else is doing that I was never meant to do. That is how I had to understand my life. That's how I had to understand the journey recently. I didn't understand that before. But I am so grateful to God that I went through everything that I went through, because had I not gone through it, I would not have understood my power. I wouldn't be able to sit in my power today. And I wouldn't be able to make viable changes that will make moves in my life way different than they were. But it does not go without saying that because I made those moves, that I was not around traumatized people who felt jealousy and envious feelings towards me because they saw somebody who didn't have what they had step into a room and do better than they did, even though they had all the resources. That's the traumatic experience of college. I'm going to get into that more because I got a couple more days of the week. So we just going to flush it out. On that note, it looks like it's about to end at 11:11. That's a divine number. Today's 11:11. So God bless you. I will talk to y'all tomorrow.